Now, it's been 2 years in the making. Blood, sweat, tears and musical staves left, right and centre for Michael's Davies and Michael's Blore. The two of them together have come up with a new musical version of the Hardy story, Tess of the d'Urbervilles. This is simply called Tess. And if you want an introduction to Tess, here she is.
Every time I look ahead, something in my mind holds me back from seeing clear, keeps the future blind. Now I'm waiting, wondering, can I hear a call, distant like the tolling of a bell? All my life I've tried to be the daughter I should be, a special golden apple on my father's family tree. But I'm older and wiser, their dreams are not for me, and so I'm wishing there was some way I could tell how to count myself, a woman or a girl. Am I bound to someone's plan? Could I take the path to a different world? Can I hold it here? Does the future lie within my hand?
Now, that's Joanna Strand, and for the first time ever, that's being heard on broadcast radio. It is the first of a series of pieces making up Tess, the musical. You just heard In My Hand. We'll have a little bit more before we finish this afternoon, but it's a real pleasure to welcome into the studio two gentlemen who have worked tirelessly for the last couple of years to bring Hardy's story of Tess of the d'Urbervilles to life. Michael Davies and Michael Blore are in the studio. Heart and head is what Michael Blore has just described himself and Michael as being. So, Michael Blore, you are the head. You're the heart.
I'm the heart.
Michael Davies, you are the head.
Well, so I'm told, yes.
Now, don't start falling out within the first sentence. I'm going to have to call you by your surnames just for the purposes of the audience. Michael Blore, your particular involvement in this is in the lyrics and the storyline of the piece, or the musical side?
The music side of things.
Okay,
yes,
fine.
yes.
Which means that Michael Davies, you're responsible for the text and the story.
It does, and I suppose in some ways that does tie in with the fact that Michael's fabulous music that you've just been hearing a bit of, for the first time anywhere in the world, is so kind of lush and sumptuous and emotional. There is no getting away from it. In a way, I mean, I had the easy bit. I just put the words to it, and so I suppose the sort of cerebral bit of the process fell more naturally to me, I guess.
All right, well, thank you for the exclusive on our behalf. Why go with Thomas Hardy and why go with Tess of the d'Urbervilles? Because it's not something that immediately springs to mind as a story that lends itself to musicality. Has anybody ever touched it before?
That's the wrong question to ask, actually, John. It's been done a few times before, I have to say.
I'm just leading you up. Come on. I'll pass them, you pick them up.
Yeah, in a variety of different ways. It did for about 5 minutes. There was a particular version that ran on the West End stage. But it didn't last very long. In some respects, there was a little bit of apprehension about tackling it. At the time, we weren't aware that it had been done before. But it's certainly not been done as a successful musical before.
Why do you think the first one went wrong then? Because it's the same story.
It is the same story. I mean, there's how many different ways of telling the same story, though? I think people have approached it in different ways. In America, there's been a rock musical version of it. There's been a folk music version of it. So, I mean, ours is very much in a sort of classical romantic musical style, and I guess when people first said, "Oh yeah, we're going to do that great tragedy of the French, miserable people," I think you know the one I'm talking about,
the Glums. Yeah.
Nobody thought that was a good idea at the time either.
And look what happened to it.
Well, indeed.
Michael Blore, from a musical point of view, romance, I have heard some of the material because you very kindly sent a few of the tracks to me so that I could have a listen before we put it on the radio. The music just wells up. It is a very emotional piece of musicality that you have produced. Mm-hmm. What's your background? I mean, what else have you written, and are there themes that, from a composer's point of view, are there themes that inevitably pop into your brain to think, oh, hang on, I could noodle away with that and I could turn something into that? Or is it the story which has inspired the music and the score for you?
A bit of everything, really. There are times where it's the story that's suggesting the music, the times certain words are triggering certain musical ideas. Tess as a subject matter appealed to me for the romanticism of it, and it's a style of writing that I am most in tune with. My own background is of classical studies, and particularly Wagner and Brahms and that sort of heritage. So it seemed a good fit for me. And I remember reading the book when I was a teenager, and it was one of those stories that stayed with me for quite some time afterwards because of the tragedy, romance and love that was present at that time. It made a lasting impression. So it seemed to be an easy fit when Mike suggested it for me.
When it comes to writing a musical, I mean, you talked about the rock version. There's Jim Stein, who's written umpteen rock musicals, but he's usually taken somebody else's words before he puts the music to it. You've got Elton John and Bernie Taupin, who arguably have written musicals together, admittedly as single pieces, but they all fit together to become an album, and that in itself is a journey or a story, if you like. What came first for the two of you? Clearly you had Hardy's writing, but
yes.
Was it the lyrics to which then the music was fitted? Was it the other way round? Or was it a bit of two creative heads going head-to-head simultaneously?
It was really interesting. We've actually done kind of a bit of everything along the way. The one thing that we did before getting into any sort of creative bit was to work out the story that we wanted to tell. Now, obviously, Hardy's novel is large and people with lots of fascinating characters, kind of in the way that Dickens often is. And you have to pick out of that overall narrative, the actual story that you want to tell. And before you wrote a note of music, and certainly before I wrote any lyrics, we probably spent 3-4 months just not filleting the story exactly, but working out what our story was. Because
you've got to get it down to, I think it's an hour's worth of stage, isn't it?
It's 2 hours. It's an hour each
in
way.
total, 2 acts.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, obviously there's some editing that's got to be done on a novel like that, and we made absolutely certain that we had what we could, perhaps a little disrespectfully referred to as our Bible, lowercase b, that was the story, and we worked out within that where the big numbers were going to go. So, and again, there's a balance to be struck between a solo number or a big chorus number, a duet. You know, what's going to work. You can't follow solo with a solo, and so there were various mechanics of it that we needed to work out. And I think the thing that really helped us along the way was that we actually nailed all that down before we ever got to writing anything. And
you thought about this from a performance perspective as well, because you've written it to be a performed stage musical, notwithstanding that we've actually got studio quality recordings of it already, but you've written it as a stage musical, but not one that's going to run away with the budgets. I mean, you talked about Les Miserables. That has an enormous cast. You could upscale things until the cows come home. You've actually started to think about this in terms of, okay, there will be professional casts who want to perform this. There may well be amateur dramatical teams that want to work with it, operatic societies and so on. So it's written actually for a relatively small cast.
It is, and you're quite right. That was a deliberate decision very, very early on. We both kind of went into it saying there's no point in writing something if it isn't going to be performed. So all the way through, we've had in mind. As I say, it's a large group of characters, but it is playable theoretically by a relatively small number of people. And we made that decision so that any producers coming at it aren't going to go, well, this is ridiculous. You know, how are we going to? We can't afford to put 40 people on stage.
And equally, if you're going to write a piece of musical theatre, you've got to think about your performance and their vocal range. I mean, Michael Blore is the composer. I was listening to the pieces this morning, and that first piece that we heard, In My Hand, which is sung by Tess and performed in this instance by Joanna Strand as a recording, it starts, you've only heard part of it on the radio this afternoon, but it starts quite low in her register as a performer, but you give her an outing. You get her right up onto the top notes, don't you?
She still loves me, though. Surprisingly.
Goodness knows why.
I know.
But you have to think about that, don't you? If you're going to set it so high that you're going to need a coloratura soprano to get it, you're going to cut down the number of people who can physically take it on.
Yes. And several reasons for doing it and writing it that way as well. One is because of working with Joanna, knowing that it's possible. As humans, we can produce those sort of sounds, and when we do, it's thrilling. And so if someone is able to reach that sort of note at that moment in the story for that song, it gives it the emotional kick that I was certainly after from the compositional point of view.
And there's certainly precedent for it. I mean, if you think of Phantom of the Opera, for instance, you know, Lloyd Webber gives ridiculous notes to Christine, and yet it's performed 8 times a week. So.
But he does that for the Phantom as well. Yeah. When Michael put it up on the stage, he has got a reasonably high pitched voice, and it stretches him to. It's very much a tenor piece. It goes right up there, doesn't it? I mean, you give an outing to your 8 artists. I've only heard 3 of them on the recordings that I've got. Those recordings, sometimes you hear of a movie going straight to DVD. You talked about previous examples, or a previous example which lasted 5 minutes in the West End. It's a major investment for any backer to put a show into the West End, or indeed to put it out on the road. Do you have to start thinking about the economics of the piece and put them ahead of the dramatic license and actually the artistry of creating a musical entity?
I'm not sure about ahead of, alongside, I would say. And this goes back to what you were talking about a moment ago, that, you know, sort of built into the process of writing it has been this thought at the back of our mind of, you know, how practical is this? How could somebody put this on a stage? What would they need? What are the resources that are going to be required to do it? And that hasn't governed the way that we've written it, but it has certainly been an influence, I would say.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Tess, the musical, is an entity. You've created this entity. It is now ready and waiting to go on stage. It's got its references to strawberries. It has its own logo. It's had its own Twitter handle. I mean, you have created a living, breathing animal. Where do people now expect to see it performed? I mean, it's interesting, Michael Blore, you're sitting there with your arms crossed. It's like, well, I've done my bit.
Actually, I need to correct you on that, because Michael's doing the work right now, actually. A lot of... what happens next, I guess, is the next question for us. And what we're hoping to do is to attract as much interest as we can, partly from producers, yes, of course, but also from the general public, which is why it's great that we're able to give it a bit of an airing here. There is a website, there is Twitter and Facebook presence that people can follow,
and Instagram.
Keep going.
You do very well. Yeah.
And actually, Michael's doing all that work on this at the moment, because, I mean, in these days of social media, actually, if we are able to demonstrate to potential producers that already there's a groundswell of people who like it, are interested in it, are following it, have listened to the tracks are freely available on the website and on YouTube. I'd really encourage people, if you're liking what you're hearing, go and seek it out, follow it, like it, spread the word as much as possible. We'd be eternally grateful.
It is a very accessible piece, listening to the lyrics, listening to the music. This is not... I'm going to get my leg slapped if I talk about hard opera and difficult opera, because it isn't. This is a mainstream piece of musical theatre which anybody can go and appreciate. Clearly, I haven't seen it, but I have heard it, and it's a very short step from hearing it to being able to see it. What do you do to get it into a theatre? Do you have to pitch it through a theatrical agent who will then take it around the UK? Do you have to go to theatres one by one? Because, I mean, all joking apart, you have done your bit. You've written the music, you've written the lyrics, you have got it ready to go. What's next?
there are different approaches, and our approach is, well, firstly, it is in the hands of a few producers and a few theatres at the present time who are considering it, so there are still...
Put it on.
Please. But we both felt it was stronger for us to not rush that process, to draw attention rather to go out and beg, which seems desperate, and that's not the style that we have for this. It's very much, this is what it is. If you do like it, enjoy it, please support it. If you don't, then thank you for listening anyway.
Well, I asked the question,
and eventually you will pick up someone. There is someone who will like it, and it's just trying to find that person.
So it's the lead time and finding the right moment in that case. I asked the question because there have been some fairly high-profile musicals which have gone into London. The critics have liked them. They've won an award. They've been involved in award shows. They've even had performances on variety shows, and then made in Dagenham shut. It's very, very difficult to have a hit which is then sustained, notwithstanding the fact you've actually got to get it onto a stage in the first place. Does it have to be London? Is now a good time for new musical theatre?
Well, I think actually now is quite a good time for musical theatre. It doesn't have to be London. There are a lot of playhouses, theatre companies, venues out there who are backing new musicals. We're really lucky in this town of Northampton to have, a theatre in the Royal and Derngate that is incredibly supportive of new material of a whole bunch of varieties. You go up the M1 a little bit. Leicester Curve has an international reputation for breeding and developing new British musicals. You don't have to go too far. You look a bit further afield, and Chichester, Guildford, Sheffield, Leeds, Bristol. There's a whole range of regional producing houses who are putting on new British work and are really driving that forward.
So would you see this as a tryout out in the provinces, knock the edges off it, get it shaped? Undoubtedly there'll be what would be the architectural equivalent of snaggings, just to get it right for the stage, and then you take it into London, and then it finds a home for itself there. Is that perhaps the game plan?
Well, I mean, we haven't sort of mapped it out quite as clearly as that, and I hope we can be flexible enough to go with whatever's right for it at the time. In our ideal world, Cameron McIntosh is going to listen to this and want to pick it up. So.
Cameron, I want a word.
Put the mobile on.
But as Michael said a moment ago, there's lots of different ways that it can happen, and I don't think we'd be too prescriptive about it. No. This is the way it's got to go. Yeah,
because also we are aware of the financial commitments it takes. So if we go knocking and bashing on so many doors and saying this is going to make it for you, who knows? Because like you said, with Made in Dagenham, with all the best intentions and the best people around it, still there are things that are going to close quite quickly and are going to lose you quite a lot of money, and we're aware of that responsibility as well.
You've only got to look at the last couple of Lloyd Webber shows, great shows, Stephen Ward, Love Never Dies, and even with his name and with his reputation.
You've still got to be very, very lucky, and looking at the right time.
Of course.
You must have a tremendous opportunity factor. You must have a great positive. The fact that you've taken Thomas Hardy, you've taken Tess, notwithstanding anybody else's production, but you've taken it. And this is a text which lots of youngsters will have encountered through school. Lots of adults who've got kids at school will have encountered it when they were at school. Leaving aside the Amdram teams who may well love to put this on, thinking about perhaps the larger side of things, the fact that this is almost curricular must give you a great opportunity to say, look, this will support your background reading for your set text, whether Tess of the D'Urbervilles is the text or not.
Well, I won't say the decision was made on that basis. We weren't quite as cynical as that about deciding what show to write. But it has been very encouraging that, when you say to people, there is this musical version of Tess of the D'Urbervilles, people go, oh, I love that book, or, oh, I did that at A-level, and I'm interested in that. So in that sense, the fact that it's a known property, it's something that people recognise. People still remember the Roman Polanski film from 1981 or whenever it was.
Yeah.
It's one of those novels that just kind of sticks in the public consciousness.
And I think that's what gives it a chance, because it's musicals, and the best musicals for myself are always about the story. You could have the best music in the world, the best lyrics in the world, but it comes down to the story. And if the story is not something that people really want to hear or really engage with, you struggle.
You two aren't reading the Brontes by any chance, are you?
What do you fancy us doing next? Wuthering Heights has been done.
Look,
We're open to suggestions.
Cameron McIntosh is on line 1. Kate Bush is on line 2. We've had one small piece, which was Tess herself singing in the voice of Joanna Strand. That was In My Hand. Where does that fit into the piece as a whole?
Yes, it comes after the opening. It's your introduction to Tess, the character, the girl becoming the woman, and talking about her dreams and the future and her hopes and desires. That sets up In My Hand.
So character establishment in that case.
Yes.
Well, let's play another brief excerpt. This is from a different part of the musical. One Look of Love. Now, this is Tess again as Joanna Strand, but Anthony Lawrence as the angel. So tell us a little bit about where this comes within the story, given it's all a little bit disjointed right now.
Yeah, it's sort of a little further into Act 1, actually, and Angel is he's a son of a parson. Right at the beginning of the show, he happens upon a May Day dance where Tess is partying with her fellow girls from the village. He's just passing through, but their eyes meet briefly. They have a quick dance, and then he's off on his travels. This One Look of Love is the moment where he kind of reappears. He walks into her life again, and they realise actually that they have met before.
All right, let's have a listen.
When the look of love shines on me again, there's no telling how, there's no knowing when. Then the only thing that I need to know is to see it so in her eyes. With just one look, a passing glance, the moment comes to take our chance. And now my world is changing with one look of love.
Can it be? He looks again. He doesn't stare at me like ordinary men. There's something more. It's something strong that tells me somehow there's a place where I belong. With just one look, a passing glance, the moment comes to take a chance. And now my world is changing with one look of love.
I always hoped for this, but life has disappointed me.
Although I wanted to believe, I never dreamed that he would come for me and win me with one look.
When
I know
the
this
look of
face, I know
love
this
shines on me
and in these arms I danced one lady for a while. He looks at me, I cannot breathe.
There's no
There's something in
Anthony Lawrence and Joanna Strand, respectively. They are The Angel and Tess. So that's One Look of Love. Both of the pieces that you've heard, world exclusives here to BBC Radio Northampton, and the first play anywhere on radio of the cast and studio recordings for a new musical, which has yet to be performed on stage, but hopefully will be performed very soon. I think you get the image very quickly indeed. You get the sense from the way the music wells up, the way it develops. I've heard a little bit more than that, but Michael Davies, as you were saying, there is a website. People can familiarise themselves with at least part of what you've written already, but the idea is now get the support, get people saying, I want to see this, and then start banging on the door of the producers.
Very much so, yeah. If I can plug it, it's tessthemusical.com, easy to remember, and on there are now 3 tracks that are linked to YouTube. You can go, you can listen to them, you can look at them. Really, where we're at now is trying to get people on board, and if people like it, if they can support it, just by being there and spreading the word, then that's what we're looking for at the moment.
I have to say, I think it sounds absolutely superb. It sounds like the finished article. It is the finished article. What we now need is to make it the finished article on stage so that a live audience can come and see it. Then you can have the cast recordings, then you can have the sell-throughs, then you can have the coach trips going down to London to go and enjoy the sights and the sounds, and of course Tess, the musical, first here on BBC Radio Northampton. Michael Davies, Michael Blore, 2 years of your lives and just the first chapter of a musical now complete.
This is where the work starts.
This is where the work starts. Well, I've got Cameron McIntosh on line 1, Kate Bush on line 2, James Dacre's now on line 3. So better answer that one. Thanks so much for coming in. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Northampton.